Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a review on the new Nibbi PE28. It's the FL version, FL designating that it has a flange. As you can see, it's not your conventional spigot style carburetor that you buy from Nibbi. It actually has a flange, so it bolts right up to the factory intake. You do not have to remove your factory intake from the bike. If you come this far, you got your old carburetor off, you toss it in the garbage, that's where it belongs. 25mm carburetors have no business being on these bikes. That's my 2 cents. If you like it, I love it, go ahead and keep using it. You're not getting the optimal performance out of your bike, but it's not my bike. It's not my bank account. Enjoy what you got. For the guys that do want to run a better carburetor, this is for you. Old carb's off, Nibbi's on. You'll go gasket, spacer, gasket, because the flange on the Nibbi does not have an O-ring style seal. You do have to have a gasket. The problem that I ran into here, I'm just going to set it like that, make things a little easier, was when you take your factory carburetor off, you have an M6 thread diameter nut. You go to put it on, find out it doesn't fit. Now, this is definitely a lot easier with the intake and the carb away from the bike. You could pull it back, set it on there, and then begin to thread it into place as you're setting the carburetor down. Or you could just run down to your hardware store, make life easy, and get some thinner style nuts for the intake studs to hold the carburetor in place. That would be my recommendation. That's my only flaw I see in this setup personally. It's not so much of a flaw, but I mean, they did just kind of add a flange directly to the conventional PE. So your fuel enrichment or your choke plunger, the body of it kind of protrudes into the area where you would thread the nut on. So that's officially my only issue with this carburetor myself. Other than that, it's what you would expect from Nibbi. It's a carbon copy of the Kian PE series, and it's in general a really nice carburetor. Personally, I really like Nibbi carburetors. They are, well, I mean, there you go. They're machined really nicely. The finish on them is really good. All the parts are easily accessible. You know, you can buy, everybody calls it a slide. Technical term, it's a throttle valve. You can buy Kian throttle valves. There's your numbers indicating what it is. Just as an example, there's a different one. Looking at them both from the same side, you can see this one has a deeper notch in it. And then you can also buy different tapered needle jets, which is something most of you will never get into. It's not a big deal. We're not going to cover that today, what different taper needle jets do, what different cut slides actually do. I mean, the basics on it is it allows more air or allows less air at certain points of the throttle. But that's neither here nor there today. We're just here to review the new Nibbi bolt-on PE28FL. When you open up the box, you'll get your carburetor. In standard Nibbi fashion, you'll get 2 or 3 main jets, you know, 1 to 3 extra primary jets. In this case, it had a 40 flow rate for the primary. That was perfect for my bike because I run a 40. The main that was in here was a 108 or a 112. That's way off for my bike. I gotta run a 130 main in my bike. Mostly because a lot of you guys know me from Facebook, Chonda Riders Performance Parts. My bike's pretty well modified, you know, custom high flow head, big bore kits, cam, you know, the whole 9 yards. It's also stuff I offer. Anybody's ever interested, you can find me on Facebook. My group's the Chonda Riders. I'm also active in most every other Facebook group pertaining to China bikes. So my overall review on this carburetor is, it's a nice carburetor. I mean, like I said, a lot of people struggle with bolting these on the conventional spigot style PE series. A lot of people have issues with that. They run into the carburetors up against the frame. It doesn't fit right. They can't make it fit correctly. This, that, and the third. I don't personally have that issue. Lower this down. I use the standard Nibbi intake. It's not cut, it's not modified. There's nothing done to it. Carburetor sits in there just fine. I don't have any issues with it, but that's me. Sorry, gotta fix this real fast. So back to the carburetor itself. Essentially, there's no difference between this carburetor here with the flange and your conventional PE series that's been available for years. Same two, I believe they're 3mm metric Allen heads, M4 thread that hold on the float bowl. Same float bowl, same float, same emulsion tube, same carburetor. Same big red idle adjustment dial, same air mixture adjustment. Yes, I said air mixture. If you flip the carburetor over, the adjustment is closest to the air inlet. That means technically it's considered to be an air adjustment. Does the same thing. I'll refer to it as an air fuel adjustment for the idle circuit, but if you want to be technical, that's what it's called. Same nice Nibbi red anodized cap. All parts are interchangeable with an actual Kean PE series carburetor. You know, you can go down to your local motorcycle shop, pick up different needle jets, different throttle valves. Still has that guy here. One thing I'm going to say here, after a while, this falls off. And it will be laying down in your float bowl. So with that said, I really do recommend taking this, throw it in the box, and putting it to the side. After using the PE30 on this particular bike for, you know, well over a year now, the last few times I took the carburetor off, I found that was just loose laying down in the float bowl. That would technically be blocking fuel flow. Not a good day. It's not what you want to find. So $77, I believe, is what this cost me to have it shipped to my door. If I had to pick a carburetor to tell somebody today to put on their bike, I do recommend this. Bolts right on. Pick your jet flow rate, put them in, bolt it on, fire up the bike, and enjoy. Nibbi really did a nice little thing here by putting the flange on. Just makes it a lot more convenient for your average person. You know, they're not a mechanic, they're not a motorcycle enthusiast. They don't care. They just want to take off the carburetor that has tamper-proof screws in it that you can only change the main jet in to begin with. The primary jet's a very odd jet in the bone stock factory shipped to your door carburetor that's on your Chonda. This is a fantastic replacement for that. So for 77 bucks, you don't need an intake. You don't have to put a pod filter on the back. You can put your stock air intake pipe right on this. Everything remains factory. You retain all the factory stuff, your air box. You just bolt this on and go. You don't need a new throttle cable. You may have to adjust the slack on your throttle cable, but you know, that's just bike to bike. Mine did not need an adjustment on the throttle cable. Yours may need an adjustment on the throttle cable. If it does, you'll see a little rubber boot where your throttle cable meets up with the throttle assembly. You loosen up this lock nut and you give the cable some slack. That's all you got to do. So yes, and ultimately in the end, I do recommend this carburetor. I do recommend buying a jet kit though, because I noticed that the PE28, unlike the PE30, came with a 108, a 110, and a 112 for the main. Neither of those three would have suited my bike, even if the bike was stock. My bike at this elevation, which is around 1,100–1,200 foot above sea level, required a 115 for the main and a 36 for my primary jet, if I remember correctly. So I do recommend a jet kit. I will add a link for the PE28FL along with a compatible jet kit that contains mains and primary jets down in the video description. If you guys have any specific questions about anything with the carburetor itself, do let me know. Just remember, if you order this carburetor, you're going to have to go down to the hardware store, get yourself some new M6 thread nuts. I'll pick that up later. And remember, the flange does not have an O-ring. So you do have to use gasket, spacer, gasket before you put the carburetor onto the intake itself, and you're good to go. So I hope this helps you pick a carburetor out for your bike. That way you can get it running better, enjoy it. You don't have to deal with a really, really cheap carburetor that calls itself a 30mm. It is not a 30mm. That's why we're talking about a 28mm carburetor here. The stock carburetor on your bike is called a PZ30 or a VM26, but a PZ30 by Kian or a VM26 by Mikuni is a 30mm carburetor. Easiest way to designate that you have a clone carburetor. Look at it. Do you have an air adjustment screw or a fuel adjustment screw directly on the side of the carburetor? If not, it's a clone carburetor. That's the easiest way to designate between them. The clone carburetors always have the fuel mixture under the float bowl. That's how you can tell it's a clone carburetor. So again, hope this helps. You guys have a good one. If you have any questions, let me know. I actually do respond and I will get an answer for you. Have a good one.